Hello, I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, and welcome to the first part of the 22nd episode of KRAD COVID readings. For this particular episode, I'm going to do something similar to what I did for the 15th episode, which is to break it up in pieces. In this case, I am going to be reading one of my Cassie Zukav stories. It is the title story in my collection, Ragnarok and Roll, Tales of Cassie Zukav, Weirdness Magnet. The previous KRAD COVID reading of William Did It is also one of the Cassie stories. Ragnarok and Roll is actually the first of the Cassie in Key West stories that I wrote. It first appeared in 2011 in the Tales from the House Band anthology published by Plus One Press. She has continued to appear in a whole bunch of different anthologies over the years. Both volumes of Tales from the House Band, Unearthed, TV God Summer Programming, Badass Fairies, It's Elemental, Out of Tune, A Baker's Dozen of Magic, and so on. And there's actually a whole guide on my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. If you go to that address, there's a pinned post that has links to a bunch of different things, including a guide to all of Cassie's fiction and where you can find it, including a free one you can find online on buzzymag.com. That's a story called Down to the Waterline. This story, Ragnarok and Roll, is where Cassie finds out why she's a weirdness magnet. I'm going to be doing this story in 3 parts, so here is part 1 of Ragnarok and Roll. It was Thursday night in Key West. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights always meant the same thing for me. Head to Mayor Fred's Saloon, order a pint of beer, and sit down to watch 1812 play. So I was kind of surprised to walk in and see a different band on the stage tuning up. What the fuck? Mira, the goth waitress, not to be confused with the mousy student waitress or the beach bunny waitress, was walking past me as I entered the open-air saloon and asked that very loud question. She stopped in mid-delivery of 2 glasses of some kind of froofy pink concoction. Yes, I'm female, but I don't do girly drinks. To say, "Hey, Cassie, yeah, 1812's kind of taking a break." I frowned. "Hey, Mira, what does that mean exactly?" Mira tilted her raven-haired head to the side in a manner she probably thought was meaningful. "Well, they still can't find a drummer after, you know." I nodded. Zeke Bremlinger, their drummer, was killed by a Nixie in the Gulf of Mexico last month. The island's full of musicians. They can't find a drummer? Not a permanent one. Come on, Cassie, you know what drummers are like. Mira shuddered. Told you Terry was a bad idea, I said with a grin. Terry was a drummer Mira had dated for all of 2 weeks before he flaked out on her, which was a week and a half longer than I thought it would take him. Yeah. She rolled her eyes. I'm surprised Bobby didn't tell you. She didn't dive this week. I worked part-time as a dive master at Sea Clips, a dive shop on Stock Island, and 1812's guitarist, Bobby Malevsky, was one of my regulars. In fact, she canceled Tuesday. Now I know why, I guess. The usual pint? I nodded. When you get the chance. She moved on to serve her customers. I looked around for an empty table, of which there were many. When 1812 was playing, I usually sat to the left, as far away from the pool tables as possible, as that would only get me in trouble, but near the front. That gave me a nice view, but allowed other people to get closer. Or I'd sit by the big ficus tree that Mayor Fred's had been built around. Back in the 19th century, that was Key West's hanging tree. This time, though, I thought maybe it'd be best to take a table near the back, by the big glass table where they sold Mayor Fred's merchandise. T-shirts, I was wearing one tonight as it happened, shot glasses, postcards, mouse pads, keychains, and so on, all with Mayor Fred's logo. The merch table was conveniently located near the exit, the ideal place to be in case this new band sucked. Which, let's face it, they probably would. Alright, it was only fair that 1812 needed a break. Having your drummer get killed by a mythical creature really took the zing out of your motivation to play music 4 times a week. But damn it, they were good. I made a mental note to give Bobby a call tomorrow. Wasn't sure what more I could do. I already got rid of the damn Nixie. But what are friends for, right? Still, it was weird not seeing them on a Thursday night. Upon achieving my hard-won master's degree in English literature from the University of California, San Diego last spring, I decided to spend a few months driving across the bottom of the country in Rocinante, my battered old 1985 Ford F-150 pickup truck. Grand Canyon, Albuquerque, Austin, New Orleans, Biloxi, the Everglades, and finally, Key West. I figured I'd stay for a week or so, spend my days scuba diving, my nights at the bars on Duval Street, and then head back home to start on my PhD. After 2 nights of karaoke, mediocre cover bands, old farts with acoustic guitars, silly dance halls, and more covers of Brown Eyed Girl than I ever expected to hear in a 48-hour time period in the places on Duval, I finally turned the corner onto Green Street and found this open-air bar with a huge fish over the entrance, a big tree in the center, and a 4-piece band on the stage that was plowing through Sunshine of Your Love. 2 were up front. On left-handed guitar, a short, blonde white woman in a white t-shirt and blue sweatpants. On bass, a tall black man with dreadlocks, wearing sunglasses, an open button-down t-shirt, and drawstring pants. Behind them were another short blonde on the keyboards. She came up front to play a second guitar or mandolin every once in a while. And a short, round white guy with a shaved head and the world's longest chin beard behind the drum kit. That last was the late Zeke Bremlinger. Bobby's the lead guitarist, and she was like a buzzsaw on Clapton's riff. They followed that with Love Rain or Me, where the keyboardist, Jane Ann Naharadny, who insisted on the stage name Jaina Neha, made the piano sound like a waterfall. But what won me over was when they did Paul Simon's You Can Call Me Al. Not only did Chet Smith nail the bass line, but Jaina whipped out a tin whistle for that solo. Even Simon used a keyboard for that when he played it live. Best of all, they didn't play Brown Eyed Girl once. Or Freebird, for that matter. After my week-long trip entered its 2nd month, I started talking to the band. By then, I'd spent enough time at Sea Clips that they were thinking about hiring me, especially since I was a certified dive master and I knew how to steer a boat. Luring not only Zeke, Bobby, and Jaina, but all 6 of Bobby's dive nut brothers to take their business to Sea Clips did the trick. I'd become good friends with Bobby, Jaina, and Zeke, and Chet tolerated my being in his presence. He's a bass player. What do you want? 9 months later, it was a rare 1812 gig that I didn't show up for. Sometimes there were odd circumstances. I was sick. They needed me to run a night dive at Sea Clips, having to get that dragon out of the garden at the B&B I was living in. But I tried very hard never to miss a gig. This was the first one they'd missed. I looked at the new band. They were setting up, plugging in, tuning, and so on. Well, most of them were. There was this one guy, not too tall, with flowing blonde hair, a red blonde goatee, ice blue eyes, and one of those physiques that men probably thought impressed women, but which bitter experience has told me usually meant the guy was compensating for anatomical deficiencies elsewhere. He was standing off to the side, trying to look important while not actually doing anything. He just had to be the lead singer. Mira came over with my beer. "So who are these guys?" I asked, as I grabbed it and gulped down a quarter of it at once. "They're called Jotunheim." Running the back of my wrist across my mouth, I asked, "Seriously?" Nodding, Mira said, "Yeah, with those 2 dots over the O. An umlaut? Jeez." I shook my head and looked over at the lead singer, who was now chatting with a woman in a tank top and shorts who'd just come out of the restroom. How Nordic. And short, blonde, and sinewy over there looks like a Viking who wandered into the wrong century anyhow, so the name kind of fits. Actually, he's kind of cute. I whirled and stared at Mira. That drummer, Terry, that she dated, she went out with him because he was very tall, extremely skinny, and had dark hair, which put him in company with every other guy Mira had dated in the 9 months I'd been living in Key West. Jotunheim's lead singer was the exact opposite of her type. She also had this goofy smile on her face. Mira had dark hair, pale skin, wore all black even in the hot sun of Key West, had black nail and toe polish, and smoked like a chimney. I think I've seen her smile once, maybe. So why the hell was she getting moony-eyed over that guy? A signal from another table got her attention, and she went off to help them, so I didn't get the chance to ask her about it. Reaching into the pocket of my shorts, I pulled out my smartphone and looked up Jotunheim. Unfortunately, none of the references I could find online were useful. It was all Norse mythology, Marvel Comics, or World of Warcraft. Nothing about a band. By the time my beer was down to almost nothing, the band was ready to start. Ihor, the bartender, grabbed the PA microphone and said, "Okay, everyone, Let's have a nice big Mayor Fred's welcome for Jotunheim! The applause that followed was a mix of excited and reluctant. I went for a good old-fashioned golf clap myself, just enough to be polite. Good evening, Key West, the singer said into the microphone up front. Next to him, the two guitarists, one acoustic, one electric, and the bass player were doing some last-minute tuning. I noticed a violin on a stand on the floor next to the acoustic guitarist, and I shuddered. A good fiddler was a noble thing, but a bad fiddler could absolutely and irrevocably destroy a band's entire sound forever. My name's Gunnar Rickardsson, and we are Jotunheim. I shook my head and chuckled. With a name like that, he almost had to call the band Jotunheim, didn't he? The electric guitar broke into the 11-note riff from the Beatles' Day Tripper. As openers went, it wasn't a bad choice. Everyone knew the song, and it bounced, so it might get a few feet onto the dance floor, which, at Mayor Fred's, was just the bit of floor between the stage and the bar. Having said that, the rendition wasn't anything special. I mean, the notes matched what Lennon and McCartney did, but there wasn't any oomph. So imagine my surprise when the song ended, and the applause practically shook the beer glasses off the tables. It was so raucous. I'd only heard applause like that in Mayor Fred's once before, about 2 months back. That night, 1812 was particularly on. It was Saturday, the place was packed, including about a dozen college students there for somebody's birthday, and they just killed with everything they did. The birthday boy asked for a Bob Dylan song, and they decided to do Like a Rolling Stone. Jaina's keyboards pierced the crowd, filling the room with the 5-note organ bit during the chorus. Bobby did a buzzsaw of a guitar solo, and Chet, Jaina, and Bobby all sang How Does It Feel in 3-part harmony with so much energy that I got goosebumps just listening to them. I still get them thinking about it. The Thursday night crowd at Mayor Fred's, which was about half the size, responded with the same enthusiasm to this mediocre rendition of Day Tripper that Saturday night crowd 2 months ago to the most transcendent version of Like a Rolling Stone I've ever heard in my life. And it only got worse. Don't get me wrong, they were a perfectly adequate cover band, but that just made them like everybody else on the island. None of the musicians screwed up anything, which actually put them one up on some of the guys on Duval Street, and Gunnar had a nice little tenor that he didn't strain too much, but the crowd just ate it the hell up. It was like they'd gotten into a time machine to see the Rolling Stones in 1971 or something. There was only one other person who didn't seem impressed. An older guy with a shock of white hair, sitting up front near the speakers. He nursed an amber drink of some kind, bourbon, scotch, and seemed to be very much not enjoying himself. I wondered why he didn't just leave. I wondered the same thing about myself. After the crowd went batshit for the most uninteresting rendition of House of the Rising Sun ever, I noticed the second guitarist picking up the violin, at which point I finally gave up. No way I was subjecting myself to that. I finished off my second pint of beer, got up, and headed out. I didn't pay my tab before I left. Normally, that wasn't an issue, especially on a Thursday, because I'd be back the next 3 nights. Now, though, I wasn't so sure. Still, everyone who worked there knew where I lived and where I worked. Hell, Mira probably had my debit card number memorized. I walked out onto Green Street, the evening breeze blowing through the rat's nest of blonde curls that I laughingly referred to as my hair. It wasn't even midnight yet, so there were plenty of folks on the street, and I found my mood, already soured by what just happened in Mayor Fred's, worsened by having to land shark through throngs of drunken tourists, drunken college students, and drunken locals. The way you told them apart, in case you were wondering, was simple. The tourists crashed into you and then apologized. The students crashed into you and didn't apologize. And the locals were able to avoid crashing into you. Luckily, after I made the right onto Duval, it was only a couple of blocks to Eaton Street. Cover bands, drunken shouting, and wretched karaoke all competed for my ear's attention. I was so used to closing Mayor Fred's down at 4 in the morning that I forgot what a zoo Duval turned into between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Just as I was about to cross Caroline Street, walking past the Bull and Whistle, a shit-faced white guy walked up to me, beard dripping from his 5 o'clock shadow, which was getting into prime time at this point, and asked, "Where's the strip club at?" Then he squinted. "You're fucking tall, lady." "I'm also tall when I'm celibate," I said with a smirk. At 5'11", I got that a lot. Then I gave him directions to the Mel Fisher Maritime Museum, which closed over 6 hours ago. "Nicely done," came a voice from behind me. I turned to see Leo, the 6'7", no-necked bouncer for the Bull. "Should have known you could handle his drunken ass on your own, but I was here for backup just in case." "Appreciate that, Leo," I said with a smile. I'd never actually encountered Leo anywhere but in the doorway to the Bull, but since that bar was a block from where I lived and halfway between it and my primary nighttime destination, we saw a lot of each other. I was fairly certain I'd never told him my name, and I had no recollection of how I learned his. With a nod to Leo, I continued to Eaton, turned left, and walked the 200 feet to a white house with a big blue porch, on top of which was a sign that read, Bottroff House Bed and Breakfast. For the first month, this was where I'd stayed. After that, with my cash reserves starting to run out, I offered to update the B&B's website. The owner, Debbie Delamonica, had web skills that were probably cutting edge in 1996 when she created the site, and as far as I could tell, she hadn't updated it since. I brought it into the 21st century, and she let me stay there gratis as long as I maintained the website and did whatever other work around the B&B needed doing. I walked around the main house, wandered through the garden's palm trees, past bushes and our parrot, Harry S., who was asleep, thank goodness, before arriving at one of the two rear cottages. I trudged up the wooden stairs to my second-story place, using my key to open the sliding glass door. "My goodness, are you ill?" I sighed. Somehow, I just knew that the captain was going to give me shit. "No, I'm not ill. I just decided to call it an early night." "The only time in the past you have returned from your drunken perambulations before the witching hour was when you were suffering an illness." I pulled off my cream-colored Mayor Fred's t-shirt, which I knew would get the old bastard's blood boiling. Sure enough, "Must you do that?" "It's my damn house. I can undress if I want to." I had on my one-piece bathing suit under the shirt and my shorts anyhow. "In fact, it is my residence, bought and paid for by the fruits of my own labors, thank you very much." "Cap, I'm really not in the mood for the usual banter tonight, so can we just skip to the part where I take my clothes off, you disappear in a huff, and I go to sleep?" Now he sounded concerned. "You are ill." "No, just cranky." "Oh dear, it's not your moon time, is it?" I stopped in mid-shorts removal. "Moon time? Okay, now you're just making stuff up. They didn't really call it that in the 19th century, did they?" "My wife did on the rare occasions when she spoke of such things before me." "Which was never?" There was a brief, semi-awkward pause. The captain and I had those periodically. "Look, I don't know why no one else who stays at the Bottroff house can see or hear the ghost of Captain Jeremiah Bottroff, the wrecker captain who built this place in the 1840s. But I can. He's been my de facto roommate since I first started staying here, and he's also far from the weirdest thing that's happened to me. I didn't talk to Debbie about it, or anyone else for that matter, but I'd kind of gotten used to being his Mrs. Muir over the past 9 months. There was a sudden breeze in the room, which meant he was gone and I could strip in peace. I'd long since stopped being self-conscious around the captain, but I didn't always want to fuck with his head either. It wasn't his fault I was his first, and so far only source of conversation in the past 150 years. Since it was still spring, I didn't need to turn on the AC. Keeping the windows open and the wooden ceiling fan over the bed going did the trick. So I just fell onto the bed without even bothering to pull the covers down. My head hit the pillow, and then I proceeded to stare at the ceiling fan for a very long time. You ever try going to bed 5 hours earlier than usual? I know people who can do it, no problem. Me, I tend to settle into a rhythm, and it's a bitch to get out of it. In college, I got up every morning at the time of whatever my earliest class of the week was, even if I didn't have that class that day. It drove me nuts. I tried everything, from trying to let the oscillations of the ceiling fan hypnotize me, to getting up to check my email, to taking a quick shower, to tossing and turning. For all that, I didn't fall asleep until almost 5. Like clockwork, I woke up at 11, crawled out of bed, guzzled some of Debbie's amazing coffee. She always served Hawaiian Kona, and it was to die for. And hopped into Rocinante in plenty of time to drive down Route 1 to Sea Clips. As I inched along behind all the other cars on the only road that traversed the entirety of the Florida Keys, I wondered why that old man at Mayor Fred stuck around so long to listen to Jotunheim when he obviously was as indifferent to them as I was. Was he related to someone in the band, maybe? According to an email this morning, I had 4 people for my 1 o'clock dive. I recognized 3 of the names. A couple who'd been diving every afternoon for the past week as part of their week-long vacation. I'd already warned them not to get sucked in the way I did. And Rainey, a local who dove with me on Fridays a lot. The 4th was new, probably a tourist, named V.E. Bulwark. Just before the bridge to Cow Key, I turned right and drove down to the coast, pulling into the large driveway that Sea Clips shared with the waterfront. The latter was a restaurant that survived mainly because people were usually starving after a dive and would eat anything, no matter how wretched. A maxim they proved after every Sea Clips dive. I always swore I'd never eat at the waterfront again after each time I did the salmonella shuffle, but I kept going back there anyhow. Bastards. Anyhow, my couple was already there. So was the old man from the bar last night. I nearly dropped my air tank. This was my first good look at him. I only saw the right side of his head at Mayor Fred's, and I realized that he was missing his left eye. No eye patch, no prosthetic, just an empty socket. Weirdly, it looked right on him. His white hair, which had been hanging loose at the bar, was now tied into a small ponytail, and he was already wearing the neoprene suit. He and the couple were all looking at air tanks to rent. I had my own. Why else do you think I drive around in a 25-year-old pickup? It's the best way to haul the tank around. But most people just rented when they dove. Especially travelers. You don't want to try and get a giant metal tube through airport security. The female of the couple noticed me first. Hey, Cassie. Hey, Hannah. David. And you must be Mr. Bulwark. I'm Cassie Zukav. I'll be your dive master. Bulwark stepped forward and offered his hand. A pleasure, Miss Zukav. I'm sorry we didn't get to speak last evening at the Saloon, but you departed before I had the opportunity to introduce myself. I smiled. That was going to be my line, only, with fewer words. Why'd you stick around so long? I am acquainted with the lead singer. Not even a relative, huh? I chuckled. Well, you're a better man than I am. We're just waiting on one more. From behind the desk, one of Sea Clips' owners, KRAD Zimmerman, said, Rainey just called. He can't make it. Okay, then. Rainey usually only made like two-thirds of his appointed dives anyhow. Which one we got, Kara? We've left Harpo for you. Great. Let's go, guys. Sea Clips had 3 dive boats, which Kara and her husband, Andy Wasserstein, had named Groucho, Chico, and Harpo. I usually preferred Groucho, but as a part-timer, I never got first pick. As we boarded the boat, I asked Bulwark, have you ever dived in the Gulf of Mexico before? He had to be an experienced and certified diver, otherwise Kara and Andy wouldn't have signed him up for a dive. No, only in the northern Atlantic. My eyes widened. Really? Yowza. I cut my teeth in the Pacific, which was horribly frigid compared to what you got off the Florida coast. But the northern Atlantic was like diving in ice water. Well, this should be nice and warm for you. Because Hannah and David had already done the close-by dives, I went out a little further to where I knew there were some nice fish and some beautiful coral reefs. David had purchased an underwater digital camera, so I went to where he'd get some good shots. Since there were only 3 customers, I had to go underwater also, since you don't dive without a buddy. Obviously, the happy couple stayed together, so I got to dive with Bulwark. I anchored Harpo and put up the red flag with the diagonal white stripe that signified that we were a diving boat. We all checked each other's equipment one last time, and then we all went under. It's so beautiful underwater. There's really nothing on land that can compare to it. There's so many different shapes, sizes, and colors, and the water embraces you and takes you in. Bulwark and I went down by a beautiful coral reef. This one had so far remained undamaged by pollution or carelessness. Picture a cauliflower made out of porcelain and you'll have an idea what an unspoiled reef looks like. There were critters all over the place too, and I made sure to snap a few pictures. I got an especially nice shot of a blue angelfish. A moment later, something caught my eye. I swam over to the other side of the reef. Something was poking out from under the sand at the bottom. It looked like something that had been deeply buried and then unearthed by the current. The 2 ends of it looked to still be pretty well buried. We found all sorts of garbage down here. But this one looked different than the usual detritus that collected. It actually looked like the tail of a lizard, but the scales were a deep emerald green that was sharper than any amphibian I'd ever seen. And between the scales, it almost looked like a gold tinge. Someone less scrupulous than I would have tried to unearth it, but there were several issues there. For one thing, it was just a small tube or tail-like piece that was buried on either side, and there was no way to tell how deep it went. For another, I preferred to leave the ocean be. I saw myself as an observer, not a participant in what was going on down there. And for a third, if that tail really did belong to a lizard, I might get pissed if I grabbed it. After a while, Bulwark and I swam back to the boat, making a safety stop partway up. As we clambered back into Harpo, I saw that Hannah and David were already in the boat, the sun reflecting off the drops of water on their face and hair and on their neoprene suits. There you are, Hannah said with a grin. We were starting to get worried. I chuckled. Sorry, found something weird. I turned the digital camera's display on and scrolled over to the picture of the weird lizard tail thingy. That look familiar to any of you? I showed it to Hannah, David, and Bulwark in turn. Nope. That looked like nothing I ever saw, no. Bulwark frowned. It looks like nothing seen on Earth. So what? David said with a laugh. You're saying it's alien? That's rich. I said no such thing, Bulwark said gravely. There was a brief, awkward pause. I started Harpo up and steered her back to see clips. Neither Kara nor Andy recognized the tale either. I sighed and wondered if I should have bothered getting prints of the pictures I took. Prints of my digital photography graced the walls of the Bottroff house, but I preferred ones I could identify. Bulwark signed up for more dives for the next several days, which I took as a compliment. It was a relief, too, since I had no idea how he liked the dive, and I'm usually pretty good at reading people. As I was loading up Rocinante, my phone beeped with a text message from Bobby. Going to Fred's to see the new band. Coming? Oddly, I hadn't decided what I was doing tonight. I couldn't recall a Friday night where I didn't know what I was doing since I came down here. I didn't really want to go see Jotunheim again. But if Bobby was going to be there, maybe I could get a straight answer about what was going on with 1812. Bulwark passed me in the parking lot. Will I see you this evening at the tavern? That clinched it. I needed to know more about this guy, especially since he was the only other person who seemed unaffected by whatever mind-altering substance Jotunheim put in their amplifiers. You bet, I said, even as I texted a similar sentiment back to Bobby. Bulwark nodded and walked off through the parking lot and continued in the general direction of Route 1. I wondered if he was going to walk all the way back to Key West. I climbed into Rocinante and pulled out onto the road, but I didn't see Bulwark anywhere. Maybe he just parked somewhere else. To be continued on the next installment of KRAD COVID Readings. Thank you very much for listening. Please stay tuned for part 2 of episode 22, which should go up on Wednesday. This is going up on Monday the 11th. Part 2 will go up on Wednesday the 13th, and then part 3 will be Friday the 15th. Thank you very much for watching. You can find me online at DeCandido.net. You can subscribe to this channel and get alerts as to when the next thing goes up. There's a little bell on there that will alert you. And my blog is at DeCandido.wordpress.com. There's a pinned post which gives you a link to a guide to all of Cassie Zukav's fiction. So if you like this story and want to read more, that's where you can find them all. And you can also support me on Patreon, patreon.com/KRAD, where, among other things, besides TV reviews, movie reviews, cat pictures, excerpts from my work in progress, and looks at my first drafts as I complete them, you can also get vignettes of my original characters, including I've done at least 5 or 6 Cassie Zukav vignettes with more to come. So check that out, please, and please stay safe.